Hi, folks. I'm Danny O'Brien. I'm a senior fellow here at the Filecoin Foundation, and I'm here to talk a little bit about governance. It's probably time for a change in Filecoin governance. We've had a long history. As many of you were there celebrating Filecoin's fifth birthday this week. And we've had the same governance system for all of that time. It was a process that was borrowed, liberated, freed, shared, forked from the Ethereum governance system. And it's largely concentrates on technical changes to Filecoin. We have the Filecoin improvement proposals, FIPS, and FIPS go through a discussion with the community and can be proposed by the community. And they go on to get rough consensus. So basically, if everybody feels that this is a good idea, and that's often the case with technical decisions where you're fixing bugs or you're improving the efficiency or the feature set of Filecoin, everybody approves. Core devs take a look at it to see whether it's something that can really be implemented. It's scheduled, and then it goes off to the train where we implement it in Filecoin's diverse set of node implementations, of protocol implementations. Sounds pretty straightforward. There's a slight challenge there, right? Which is that as Filecoin has grown over time, we've had to deal with more than just the technical addition of the feature set. There have been crypto-economic values that we've wanted to change at the beginning of Filecoin. A lot of those parameters were very carefully chosen, but times change. We learn from how the system operates, and sometimes those things want to be tweaked. We want to cope with new economic challenges from the outside macro environment. We learn things about what storage providers, what developers, what token holders want from the system. And so all of those factors also have gone into our governance program, because how else can you solve for different communities wanting slightly different things and wanting to come up with a compromise or a proposal which changes all of those values? And historically, that's been a bit of a struggle to do in the model that we liberated from the Ethereum network. But for one reason, the Ethereum network uses its storage providers as an extra level, right? So you put a proposal in, and then it's implemented, and then the Ethereum miner community, validator community, chooses which thing to take. That isn't really a model that works particularly well for the Filecoin ecosystem, because we have many different players. Anyway, I'm talking about the past, and I want to talk and introduce the future. As some of you know, for the last few months, we've been pulling together research and clearing up some of the backlog of proposals and ideas that have been building up over the last year or so as we've been preparing for this kind of new era of Filecoin. I think many of you may have noticed that the pace has been picking up. We have a bunch of innovations coming down the line. We have not only technical improvements to consider, but we have a treasury too. We now have the public goods funding mechanism beginning to ramp up, and we want to plug that into our general governance system to make sure that everybody is able to give their input into not only what technical changes should happen on the network, but how we can think about compromising and expanding our crypto economic opportunities. And also, it's probably time now to think about how we can do some treasury management over governance. That means getting the resources that we have to fund and invest in the network, both in the short and long term, and create the incentives for the provision of services and tools that don't necessarily fit into a commercial model, which is to say, some parts of the ecosystem, a lot of the parts of the ecosystem are incentivized by people making money from sales and services to people in the rest of the network and beyond. But some of them are public goods. Some of them are things where we actually, it's probably the easiest thing to do is to have a sort of long-term funding. And how do we decide those funding? Anyway, that's the big picture. There are a lot of changes abroad. I'm really here to introduce you to the people who are going to be shepherding those changes at the rapid pace that Filecoin is running at this moment. So it's my pleasure to introduce the Filecoin governance team, Tanisha Katara, Michael Madoff, who've been working really hard at creating a plan for the execution of a new generation of Filecoin governance.
So good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Madoff. I recently joined the Filecoin Foundation as the head of governance, and I wanted to take a moment to properly introduce myself, my philosophy, and the lens I bring to this work. Before stepping into this role, my journey cut across governance, technology, and strategy. My studies were in political science and diplomacy. Before joining the foundation, I helped pioneer liquid democracy and launch on-chain governance for the Cardano ecosystem. And prior to that, I was a strategy consultant at the Boston Consulting Group. What drew me to Filecoin is the urgency of its mission of preserving humanity's data. I believe in the coming years, as technologies like AI disrupt our society, the importance of data sovereignty and authenticity through decentralized governance is going to become a vital concern. I'm new to the Filecoin ecosystem, so over my first 2 months, I've prioritized listening and learning as much as I can what's working, what's not, what needs to change. The results offer both lessons that the Filecoin governance team is shaping into concrete phased reforms and evolution. And so I wanted to introduce what we are calling the Constellation Program. And this is our new approach to governance reform. The Constellation Program isn't just a rebrand, it's a deliberate, phased, and modular methodology to modernize how decisions get made and how the community allocates resources for maximum impact. So why Constellation? Think of each entity in the Filecoin ecosystem as a star. Distinct, important, interrelated, alone each star matters. Together as a constellation, they reveal a navigable structure for our ecosystem. And so rather than a Big Bang overhaul, Constellation unfolds in distinct phases with each module piloted, stress tested, and improved before broader adoption. And so in terms of the process that we've been through so far, we began, like I said a couple of months ago, in a discovery phase, going through a current state assessment, understanding what are the pain points with all of the various stakeholder groups within the Filecoin ecosystem. We then did a benchmarking exercise, understanding how do other ecosystems deal with these types of challenges in a way that we've seen success. Right now, we're in a phase of developing the operating model. How is governance going to work? We start with defining the governance pillars, which is the scope of what is being governed. We also talk about the voting and decision-making methodology and who all of the stakeholders involved are. And so that's the portion I want to focus on today. But as we look ahead to FDS 7 in Argentina, this phased modular approach is just the beginning. It sets up a much broader community-shaped evolution that will come into focus, and we want to really have a co-development emphasis. But before we get there, we need to do our homework, and that's listening, gathering feedback, refining each component on the roadmap so that it reflects the realistic needs and aspirations of the Filecoin community. And so with that, I want to turn it over to Tanisha, who is our expert consultant and is going to talk us through the current state assessment work that we've been doing.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. The current state assessment essentially involves some form of quantitative and qualitative understanding. So when I say qualitative, what I mean is having stakeholder interviews where we spoke to, and some of you might remember, I've reached out to a couple of you here. We've spoken to implementers, code devs, a couple of SPs. We're very happy and open to speaking to more, but this is a culmination of all the interviews we've collected so far. And we've also had a governance voices poll. So if you've been following the last few code devs, we often end it with, there is a poll and please fill it up. And we've collected results from that poll. And we've also had a more in-depth APAC governance survey across 68 respondents. The interviews with folks today have kind of raised a few pain points, and I'm going to quickly summarize here across different stakeholder groups. Implementers specifically have spoken about a lack of FIP prioritization, and very reasonably so, because when we plan network upgrades, we often have massive backlog, and there's a very clear need for a governance framework that's inclusive yet very practical in implementation. Code devs have often spoken about limited time and resources, and we've kind of seen that in the way some of these calls pan out. There is a very clear FIP lifecycle management needed, where there are steps and there are triggers, very specific triggers that lead a proposal from stage 1 to stage 2, and we've heard that across the community. FIP editors have spoken about clear guidelines and roles and responsibilities and being able to do a better job. And of course, storage providers, the heart of our system, have spoken about very low trust in governance, a certain perceived sense of centralized decision making, and it's kind of important that we culminate all of these into what we're designing. It's important to us that these pain points anchor us, and we're actually solving them. So we often go back to the slide and say, are we actually solving these problems? APAC, I think this was a recent survey that was specifically targeted at the APAC region. And the three highlights that you can see on the slide is that 60% say that they're not actively participating in governance, and we want everyone to. So we're going to work actively to help bring in an easy yet a very transparent process here. 18% feel stakeholders are not fully represented, and only 18% feel that they're fully represented, which is a concern. We want to bring more inclusivity. And then 43% believe that governance model should remain flexible and experimental, and spot on with that. Couldn't be a better time for us to jump in and make us feel a little bit more confident in our phased approach of governance that we're currently taking, and you'll see soon more about. To give everybody some context, governance landscape benchmarking is our attempt to derive the right governance approach. Instead of jumping into solutions, which is a mistake I've seen as a consultant in many, many industries, we didn't want to repeat the same thing here. We want to work with you folks and with objectivity in order to be able to see all possible permutation combinations that could exist, and picking and having an evaluation matrix to pick one. At FTS 7, we will be presenting a more in-depth analysis, but this is to give you an understanding of how we've approached it, Michael. So for those of you listening to governance, there are essentially two kinds of voting powers today. One is what we call as weighted, which is on the right side. I'm starting with weighted because it essentially is the more complex one, where instead of just saying one token is equal to one vote, you say one token when done, like when you have applications on that token, for example, you lock it up for X amount of time, or that token is now combined with your GitHub reputation. It tends to have a higher voting power. And that's what we call as a weighted voting power or adjusted voting power. This can happen through reputation, this can happen to time lock voting, this can happen through longer stakes, different ways to weight voting power. Then the other side of the coin is what we call as unweighted voting power. This is one person is equal to one vote, or one token is equal to one vote. And there are pros and cons. unweighted is simpler, right? You just get somebody to do KYC or KYB and you give them one vote, or you take one token, you map it to one vote. It's transparent, it's extremely easy to implement, but it has massive trade-offs. Vitalik talks about this in his paper, and just to kind of bring out that sentiment here a little bit, you have Sybil attacks, you have collusions. Whales tend to dominate in such systems. We've seen governance attacks that have happened over the years, predominantly in these models. Weighted voting power, on the other hand, while it's inclusive, it rewards participation, it's hard, it's complex. If you define reputation wrong, or if it's subjective, it can be dangerous. So these are the trade-offs. Here are some examples of unweighted voting power models. So you have Uniswap, which has one token, one vote. You have Polygon, which is staked voting, which is one staked vote token is equal to one vote, which has more skin in the game when compared to a pure token model, but it also is open to like collusion, Sybil, and stake concentration. So if I'm somebody with just more resources, I can stake a lot more and just control a lot more, which is scary. And then you have identity-based, which is something that Gitcoin CLR has experimented with. It's safe from Sybil attacks, but it has challenges in verification, and it has challenges in skin in the game parameters. About weighted, these are the different kinds of weighted voting power models that we're studying. One is vote escrow. And in fact, we have an in-depth research on this, followed by curve finance and balancer. Vote escrow is essentially you telling, I'm going to lock my tokens for 6 months, versus person B telling, I'm going to lock my tokens for 12 months. So the more skin in the game and the longer you're aligned with the network, the more voting power you get. Reputation-based is more contributions is equal to more voting power. But how do you define contributions? The devil is in the details. The quadratic voting is essentially the more exponentially you go up, the more votes is not true. You kind of reduce it exponentially in order to make it more expensive to attack. Like quadratic voting attacks are generally very expensive. And then representative democracy is where I don't get a direct say. I delegate my voting power to experts, and they get a say to vote. And that's a way to kind of get more technical expertise and concentrate it into that. So we have all the examples listed below. We have a case study which kind of goes deep into Curve Finance's research. I'd love for everybody here to read. The link is at the bottom of the slide. What it really shows is how Curve Finance's governance model accrues value for the token. So 65% today of circulating Curve is locked in the governance locker. And out of that 65%, over the last 1 year, an average of 38% tokens have been used actively for voting. Here's why. Those tokens or that voting goes into how the treasury spends or allocates resources to different liquidity pools. So governance becomes an extremely important means to an end. And when you lock tokens, you're essentially reducing the circulating supply, and you're reducing it for a predictable amount of time. So you know exactly who's locked up for how long. And your demand goes up because now I want to vote. I want to be able to tell the treasury to allocate resources wisely. So this is a very interesting case study of how the governance is a means to an end and ends up accruing value for the token. And I'd love for folks to kind of jump into this and read more.
Thanks, Tanisha. And I should mention, not only does Tanisha know about this topic, but she's actually the author of this paper that we're citing here. So definitely give that a read. Now I want to turn over to talk about governance pillars and the scope of what is being governed. And I think that's kind of the first question in the design process that we have to ask. And so what I'm introducing here is a framework for that understanding. So talking about the scope of what needs to be governed, picture the governance pillars framework as the architecture of a resilient building. Each pillar represents a vital structural element. Economic, operational, and protocol governance working together to support the entire system. At the top, the roof symbolizes the values and the vision we're striving to protect, from openness to long-term resilience. And then at the foundational layer, you have meta-governance, which is the rules about making the rules. You have institutions, tools, and processes, all of which feed into the stability of the governance system. And the clarity of the overarching design and the balance ensures that Filecoin's governance can meet tomorrow's challenges with confidence and stability. And so the first pillar that we need to stabilize is economic governance. This is all about incentives and funding mechanisms that sustain the Filecoin network. This pillar covers how rewards are distributed, storage and retrieval incentives, grant programs, the management of the mining reserve and treasuries. Public goods funding sits at the heart of this process, ensuring that essential infrastructure, research, and developer tools get the resources they need. By designing structures that make economic participation viable and fair, we can have Filecoin aim for long-term stability and growth. The second pillar is operational governance. And operational governance focuses on translating governance decisions into secure, reliable action. This often happens through off-chain coordinated systems, think the FIP process, community meetings, coordination behind network upgrades. It's about roles, responsibilities, processes. This pillar ensures the governance lifecycle from proposal to discussion to implementation is clear and inclusive and productive. And delegate management, stakeholder coordination are essential here so that every part of the network, from technical contributors to community leaders, is represented in the pipeline. And then third, we get down to protocol governance. And protocol governance is the engine for on-chain decision-making and technical evolution. It involves the rules that govern Filecoin's infrastructure, from parameter changes, consensus rules, technical councils and committees that have a defined on-chain role, for example. This pillar is responsible for enabling changes in voting contracts, on-chain execution of governance outcomes, and here mechanisms like quorums and time locks play a pivotal role, ensuring that technical upgrades remain secure and consistent with the broader values and vision of the Filecoin ecosystem. And so all of that is leading up to FTS7 in Argentina, where we want to go through taking all these elements and an exercise in co-designing what governance looks like and deciding what the right methodology for voting in Filecoin is. And Tanisha, actually, if you'd like to share about some of the concepts around rational choice theory that are feeding into this, just briefly about previewing what the activities are going to be at FTS7.
Oh, 100%. So the FTS7 activity is going to be us breaking the right voting methodology into 4 parts. Number 1 is voting agents. Who are the people that are going to vote? And being able to define that very clearly. Today, you have AI, you have humans, you have committees, you have councils. So we're going to break that down a little bit. We have voting alternatives, which is what options do folks have? Is it yes, no? Is it yes, no, abstain? Is it yes, no, I don't know? So we're also going to, because these are very important in how quorums are decided. So we're going to kind of narrow down into that. We're going to jump into voting power, which is what is the right mechanism to determine voting power? And finally, aggregation rules, which is how are we going to count votes? Is it just the maximum number of votes for a certain option wins? And what are the flaws with that model? And for each of these, we have an evaluation matrix. So we aren't just going to present the landscape and say, pick one. We're going to have an evaluation matrix that's custom designed for Filecoin. And we're going to score each of these options across that evaluation matrix. And that's the exercise we're hoping to do in person with all of you at FTS. We have a pre-read if you want to read what the landscape looks like. So you have an edge and you have a heads up when you're there. But the next slides are the pre-reads. Michael, if yes. So the pre-reads go as follows, just to help you folks navigate. Voting agents are broken down into 3 parts. Single voting body, which is just committee, just the council, just Michael, just Tanisha, hopefully not, but It's a singular voting body, and that voting body could be just community or just committee. Dual voting bodies are a balance between a committee and a council. So you have a kill switch, what they call as a dead switch sometimes, where there's a committee that, like, the moment something goes wrong in a system, they turn it down. You have technical committees like Polkadot that bring in a certain expertise, and community alongside taking decisions. So there's a checker, a balanced system. And then you have a multi-voting body, which is some explorations being done at NEAR, where what if AI agents could step in and vote alongside community, alongside committees? And also you have reputation models where each group has like a certain formula on how you calculate voting power. And goes without saying, some of these have pros and cons. Multi-voting bodies are harder to coordinate. Dual voting bodies are easier, but you need to be very, very careful in how you design them, and it actually needs to be a maker checker. And single voting bodies often work best for early stage or smaller communities where you want to bring centralized speed initially. Voting alternatives, this is the landscape, and I'd love for you folks to keep them in mind as we evaluate them. You often see multi-sigs with just one button which says approve. You don't know why the others didn't vote. Was it because they weren't present, because they didn't agree, or were they just abstaining? Then you have two options, which is the most common one, which is approve, reject. You have three options, which is approve, reject, abstain, which has issues in the way it's often designed. And then you have options with explanations, where you vote on chain and then you give a big explanation on why you voted yes or no. So these are different ways, and we'll evaluate them, and we'll discuss the evaluation matrix at FTS 7. So we presented voting models to you folks. We discussed vote escrow, we discussed reputation. This is how we're going to assess them. We are assessing them across 3 dimensions: economic, technical, and value alignment. And I have defined them over here along with criterias, having them as pre-reads so we can collectively do that assessment together and see the scores, and you can disagree or agree with those scores at FTS 7 will be very useful. And hence, this is one of the pre-reads. The evaluation matrix is a good pre-read. And finally, we have aggregation rules. So once you know who's voting, how they're voting, how voting power is calculated, it's very important to be able to say what is majority consensus. And there is a course called as Computational Social Choice, which is amazing, where I've picked out some of the aggregation rules, which is a holistic mapping of aggregation rules. And they are being used in countries today. And Filecoin's complexity is not short of a country, and it's good to kind of be able to see the entire landscape and say which aggregation rules or which combination of aggregation rules would most protect us against attack vectors. So we'll be doing an attack vector analysis to see which of these aggregation rules protect from which attack vectors. With that, over to you, Michael.
As we close out this first session, the invitation is clear. The future of Filecoin governance depends on all of us co-building together. The frameworks and design space we've explored aren't theoretical. They need your input, your challenge, your expertise to become real lasting solutions for the ecosystem. And I have to tell people all the time, governance isn't magic. It isn't a silver bullet. You have to show up and do the work if you want to be well governed. And so everything is leading up to FTS 7 in Buenos Aires, where we'll bring together the global community to finalize, pilot, and launch the next phase of governance evolution. And this is your opportunity to come help and shape the models and processes that will guide Filecoin's evolution for years to come. Whether you're a developer, researcher, storage provider, policy advocate, there's a seat at the table for you, a direct path to making an impact. So please join the discussion, get involved in upcoming working groups and forums, and we can help set the standard for open, resilient, and accountable governance. And together we can co-create the mechanisms and culture that secure the future of Filecoin, and by extension, the future of digital stewardship of humanity's most valuable data. And and if you'd like to contact me, this is my email address here, michael@phil.org. And thank you so much for listening.